Welcome to another session of Ask Me Anything. This is where I take the questions that folks have been posing when they answer the question like, what's the hardest thing about parenting right now? Questions. And I address them here in the Facebook group to the best of my ability, wanting to, give you at least that first thing that you can try and do to make changes. Whether it's when your kids are melting down or having a tantrum or getting in a power struggle with you, what's a first step you could take? Or if it's something like, how do I deal with my kid feeling more isolated and lonely? We have a lot of great topics today, and I just want to make sure that each of you has a chance to get a little bit of my time today, including, let's see, we've got Jamie and Linda, Caroline, Melissa, Vanessa Moses, Monica, Sarah, Jay, Rachel, Carito, and Katie, as well as Valakina, Jenny, Maggie, and Kristen, even Melanie too. These are all folks who have joined our group recently, and it would be great to see each of you who are listening also put in, some encouragement to the people who are asking these questions. One thing I'm going to do is go ahead and put their names into a comment so they can, and you can see a preview of what the questions are today, just so that you can have a sense of what we're going to be covering. So keep an eye out for that. And while I'm doing that, I just wanted to also share with you that we do have an exciting event coming up. It is the Navigating Meltdowns, Tantrums, and Power Struggles webinar. This session, I've done it live in person. I've done it, here virtually in the virtual format on here and on Zoom or on Facebook. And it has by far been our most popular workshop for a reason. And that's because we all have big emotional moments. They just happen. And when it happens for our kids, though, sometimes it's even more challenging for us to stay present with and really know what to do, because, kids have a limited life experience. And so oftentimes the way that they melt down or the way that they show up in their tantrums is a way that's like kind of challenging for us to relate to. For example, they might be really upset that, they didn't get to go first for something. And it seems a little bit arbitrary or silly or irrational to us, because we know that all they need to do is wait a minute and they'll get to go. We can't relate to it that easily. Or perhaps it just sort of goes from 0 to 100 out of, so quickly that we can't even keep up with it. That's another thing that people experience when it comes to meltdowns. Another thing I've seen too is, really having kids and parents kind of escalate each other, and it's easy to do. And I want to just speak to the fact that I get it. I get it. I've been there. It's like, you are, in the middle of a conflict with your kid. You don't realize you're even in one sometimes until it's too late, and you're already losing your cool. They're losing their cool. And it just escalates into what could be a big old throwdown or power struggle. So if you can relate to any of this, I do really recommend that you come to our Navigating Meltdowns webinar. It's next Saturday, October 2nd, and it starts at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And what we're going to do during that meltdowns and tantrums and power struggles webinar is give you specific ways that you can feel more calm and more confident when your kid is melting down. Because it's not just about, knowing how to manage them. Of course, we want to be able to manage them, but it's also about making sure that we are coming from a place where we really truly understand what's happening. So we don't have that feeling of being sort of confounded when it's going on, because what ends up happening then is a lot of things shut down for us. For example, we can be less compassionate, for one. We can be less patient. I know that happens to me really easily. I get frustrated, and then I become a lot less patient than if I was kind of having these key insights I'm going to be sharing on Saturday, that next Saturday, where you will be able to kind of find that patience that is just maybe kind of elusive for you right now. Maybe it's not about being patient, but it's just about feeling effective. Like I've had a lot of folks come to me saying, you know, Vanessa, I feel like I can be patient, but I don't always know what to say to be effective, like to effectively support the kids, you know, my child with their big emotion, and help them navigate it in a way that helps them grow, helps them learn, helps them feel more empowered. So whatever the reason is for you to want to come to this session, you know, I really recommend that you clear some time on your calendar, October 2nd, next Saturday, from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Pacific, so that you can, you know, wrap your head around these meltdowns, tantrums, and power struggles, what's actually happening in the brain, in their little brains, and then most importantly, how to feel more calm, confident, and effective and empowering for your kids. So I'm going to go ahead and put the Zoom link, or not the Zoom link, sorry, the registration link up for you so that you can grab a spot in that session. It's going to be so good. Okay. So I've got that for you. It's about to pop it in. Now, as I'm doing that, I want you to think about, you know, what is the hardest thing that you've been experiencing lately in your parenting? Because this is an opportunity for you to be able to get your questions answered as well. So for example, we've got Jamie Van Ness, that her daughter's 3 years old, and her daughter can be very, very hard on herself if she makes a mistake or can't do something. So we've got a young sort of self-critical, you know, personality on the planet here, dear Jamie's 3-year-old. So I'm going to go ahead and roll into that. But again, if you're here, let me know you're here, the ages of your kids, if you could add that into in location. Like I could say I have a 22, 26-year-old stepkids and a bonus 7-year-old in my household right now. And then I'm also tuning in from the San Francisco Bay Area. I would put that in there. And then if you do have something, a question, go ahead and put that in, or maybe you're here just to listen, say hello by letting me know you're here. Go ahead and put it in the comments, the ages of your kids and your location. It's also a way we can all get to know each other. And when you do ask a question, I can put it into context of especially the ages of your kids. So the hardest thing for Jamie, again, is that her daughter can be really hard on herself when she makes a mistake or can't do something. So Jamie, this points to what is going to be a very early version, a very early awareness around having more of a growth mindset. And a growth mindset has to do with knowing that we are human beings in progress. And instead of thinking, oh, I can only accomplish this if I'm good at it, or if I have a lot of experience in it, or I have an innate talent in this, right? Rather than seeing talents, abilities, even personality traits, even character traits as things that are flexible and can actually grow. And so seeding a growth mindset for a 3-year-old might be, first of all, I would be checking in, how do I model what it looks like to make a mistake and be very forgiving to yourself, and kind of give yourself the permission to try things, make mistakes, and learn from them. And it's not just the doing, it's also the saying when that happens. So you can go, oh, whoops, I dropped it. And maybe the old way might be, shoot, I should have been more careful, right? Or like, whoops, I dropped it. Oh, I guess I'm still learning how to balance 3 things in my hands. Maybe I could practice that later, just as an example. Or oh no, like the old way, when you make a mistake, maybe when you're like drawing something, it's like, oh, I need to start over, I don't like this, and you throw it away. And the new way could be like, oh, it didn't turn out how I liked, but I wonder if I could turn this into something else. I mean, I was gonna try to draw a balloon, but maybe I can turn it into bubbles or a butterfly. And then you play with that. The other thing you can start reading out loud, Jamie Van Ness, is the Book of Mistakes. I think the author's name is Kareen. A wonderful book about how an artist is making art and then says, whoops, something goes wrong, not as planned. And then they turn into something even more wonderful. And that's the message of the book. So any of you who have those kids who tend to be a little bit more self-critical, even at a very early age, you can really reframe it with your mindset and start there as role modeling that. The other thing you can do is have a few family mottos around growth, like we're all learning and growing, hon. It's okay. It's okay. We're all learning and growing. And if the emotions are running high, again, come to my meltdowns workshop. I promise you, I'll get you some good ideas. But if the emotions are running high, I would actually help with the soothing and then the try it again. Because sometimes we go too quickly to try it again. It's okay. Try it again. And they're actually not yet in that stage where they can tolerate their frustration. They're still learning how to tolerate the frustration moment, helping them emotionally be soothed with their reaction to the mistake first, and then bring in the let's try again, or how can I help you, or is there a smaller step we can try, or a slightly easier version of this we can try. Is there something we can put into place that will support you, and so that can be really helpful. I would also disrupt it if a child is doing it over and over and over again, being hard on themselves. I would actually redirect them to some other activity, change up the scene, get involved, offer them a hug, like do something to kind of shift them away and help them reset and regroup before they come back to it. Because otherwise they could end up having such a negative experience with that thing that they want now they've actually created their own fixed mindset around it, right? So it's like, doesn't look how I want it to, it's like, and they're like, bad paper, bad crayon, they get really upset. Help them move away, get some space and reset and try and, help them find a way to kind of come back into it. Maybe they could trace first before trying to draw something complicated. Maybe they could try something simpler first, like just drawing the middle part instead of all the little details, for example. So there's a lot of ways to kind of bring it back down to the skill level, like the level they're at, with this hopefulness that if they practice at that level, they can then achieve maybe their higher goal. And we can do this with little ones with just simple actions and simple words. So Jamie, let me know what you got out of that, okay? And anybody else who's listening. Oh, Bliss Birdie, one of my clients is here. Hi. And Misha, hi, one of my colleagues. So good to have you here. Yes, you are here in Northern California as well with your adult kids, Misha. I know, Bliss Birdie, you've got 2 kids who are more in the preschool, lower, kindergarten age in your life. And yeah, having a parent modeling this, wouldn't it have been nice? Well, the good news is we now can pass along an improved version to the next generation. Well, what a gift, what a invitation. Yeah. So I just admire each and every one of you who asked these questions or are in this group for saying, wow, maybe I could improve upon what I was modeled in my childhood. Good on you for being here today and for being a part of this group. So Linda McDade is saying on a different topic, how can I parent more consistently? This is interesting. This is something one of my clients really, really wanted to bring into his parenting practices. We had a VIP day that he won in one of our client contests where he got to spend 3 hours, he and his partner, with me. And we walked into these 4 different rooms in a kind of visualization. And the room that he didn't want to leave was the one that was all about consistency, because it's such a theme that folks really tend to crave, either because they know they need it for themselves and they don't have it, or they know that one of their children or all of their children are like really showing distress because they don't have it. And maybe even because it's something that they've had experience with in the past and things went much more smoothly, or they know it exists and haven't yet had a chance to create it. So wherever you are with being able to be consistent, I'm just, letting you know that there's a variety of ways, variety of reasons why this comes up, and wherever you're at is perfectly good. So when we think of consistency, oftentimes it's really actually about like getting organized and getting clear. Because if you're clear about what it is that you want to be consistent and how you're going to what you're going to say and what you're going to do in different situations, that helps so much. It's one of the things that we do in our year-long program, right, Bliss Birdie, right? To make sure that we're getting clear of like, what are the limits and like, what are the routines? What what do we care about? What do we value that we're going to be as consistently creating a family culture around as possible? Because if you know what the what is, then the how follows, right? So getting clear on what it is that you want to be consistent about is number one. Because otherwise, what happens is you're in the moment and you know that you need to do something about, let's say, hitting, like siblings hitting each other, but you're not really clear about why hitting's not okay and what they can do instead and how you're going to react, like what you're going to say and do, then it's really difficult to be consistent because you don't really have a plan going into it that you can sort of rest into when you're in the moment. I mean, it's just like, you know, how we practice in like driving school, like how to parallel park with an instructor there first, or maybe with, if you're at a learning permit, maybe with an adult who has a license. And then when you're out there kind of taking it live into the wild, and you're by yourself parallel parking, you have something, you're like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm going to check this mirror. Then I'm going to do this. I'm going to back up. Like you have sort of the template of what you do. Well, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of, structure around how to be there for a child who's emotionally having a difficult time or how to guide a child towards making better choices. And yet we can template that too. And so that there's an exciting opportunity there that once you're clear, you can get advice and steps on the how, like how am I then going to respond? So what I would say first, Linda, in terms of consistency is I would work on the clarity piece, like making sure you're really clear about why your rules are, what your expectations are, what they are, having clarity around how you'd like to respond when those are crossed. I would want you to get really clear about what your routines are and make sure they're designed really well to make sure there's enough time for each of the things that need to fit into your routines. And I would want you to, have a way that the whole family can get into a rhythm around your routines. So those would be the two things I would start with. And then the third piece is I would want you to have some sense of consistency of how you're going to respond to big emotions and even motivate your kids, because those areas, those are the 4 of the 7 pillars of my program, by the way, because when you get clear and you start to have your approach become more and more refined and then very consistent, it's amazing what problems get solved. Smoothly running routines, clear expectations, and with an idea of how you're going to follow through, clear sense of how of what motivation looks like in your household and how we navigate emotions goes so far. And I know those of you who have been working with me can attest to like what it's like to have breakthroughs in that area. It makes such a difference. So Linda, I guess what I would want to hear from you is where would you like to start in getting more consistent? Is it more in the routines area? Is it more in like the limit setting, like boundaries and expectations? Could it be more in the how we handle big emotions in our households and how you're going to respond to them? Or could it be like what are the ways we motivate our kids besides rewards and punishments? Like I wonder which of those 4 kind of speaks to you as like that's the one. And then what I would encourage you to do is even take the quiz to find out. I put the link in the post of this recording. Okay. I can try to put it into the chat, but sometimes in the comments, but sometimes it doesn't let me. So I'll give it a try, but if not, it's in the post for sure. Take the quiz, and anyone else who hasn't taken it yet or hasn't taken it in a while, it's designed to help you figure out like, what do I need to be more clear about and have more tools and strategies with so that I can, have more success with things like being more consistent and in a way that flows. It's not effortful over time. Yeah. So, it let me post it. Great. There it is. I love when Facebook agrees. Misha can relate, I'm sure. So get clear, Linda, and like, let me know when you take the quiz, like there's a section where you can fill out, like, what would you like the most support with, or maybe put it in the comments here, and we can go from there and get a little more detailed. And there's even a spot where you can apply for a free 20-minute session with me, strategy session, where we'll figure out what strategies will address that and get you the fastest results on what you want in terms of consistency. Okay. So this, I'm going to shift to this next one, but if you're listening and something just popped out to you, like, ooh, consistency, I get it now. Like, let me know, put it in the comments. Okay. All right, let's see here. I've got Melissa Morris. And who else? Melissa Morris, Vanessa Moses. Oh yeah, and Caroline, who I'm going to be talking to later today, because she applied for a session after the last webinar and qualified. They all have topics here relating to power struggles. Oh, power struggles, power. Power is so interesting, isn't it? And the reason I say that is because kids are fascinated by power. Certain kids in particular, like just like our Linda one is there, she seems to probably her 3-year-old has a great attention to like beauty and excellence is my guess for your little 3-year-old Linda, because her standards are so high. So she has this maybe this sense of like what is the optimal performance or the excellence, and when she doesn't measure up, she's hard on herself. Other kids, it's going to be more about power and how power works in the social dynamics of the family. What are the power dynamics of the family? Yeah. We've been talking about that. You know, when we talk about mistaken goals of behavior, which is based off of Rudolf Dreiker's work, and Jane Nelson developed it more, the author of Positive Discipline, and sort of like one of my main touchstones in terms of research and advice. And the thing about mistaken goals is that it's not, I just want you to know right away that it's often an unconscious, like it's almost compulsory, not necessarily in an OCD way, although maybe, but it's just, like kids are compelled to test out, how do I get attention? How does attention work? How do I get less attention too, depending on their temperament? How do I get less power too? Like, I don't want to be responsible for that. Please don't make me the one who's choosing. Or how to get more power. Hi, Kayla. Yay, glad Kayla's here. So wondering about these little guys, right? So we've got Caroline, Melissa, and Vanessa. How is their desire for power showing up? Because that will give you some real clues about like what kind of power to offer them. So Caroline just shared that her 6.5-year-old is having power struggles. Same with her 13-year-old Melissa's 13-year-old, and the 5-year-old. I mean, they literally just all said power struggles, power struggles, power struggles. But I would want you to start paying attention to like what kinds of things do they seem to want more information about when it comes to power struggles. Because first and last job of a young child, especially, but all developing people, is to figure out their world so they can function in it. Especially when it comes to relational things, like power struggles are literally exist because someone else is there. So it's about relationships and about social dynamics. So what kinds of power struggles are you getting into? Like about what? And that'll give you some clues. So first thing I'd want you to pay attention to. Second thing I'd want you to pay attention to is like, I mean, not even pay attention to, but start like brainstorming is like, okay, what's another way they can get this kind of power? So let's say it's power over choices, like power over options. So you offer your kid this food and they said, I don't want that. And you offer them another food. I don't want that. And then another food. I don't want that. No, yuck. Think of young, like 6.5, like Caroline's child, maybe, right? Or so choices. For 13-year-old, it could be like, we're gonna you know, you're on vacation and you already have the restaurant picked out and it's time to go. And they're like, they drag their feet, they have a meltdown, they throw a tantrum about it, get into a power struggle of like, well, I'm not going to eat anything if we go there. There's nothing for me on the menu. Or like, you know, I hate that restaurant, right? It could look different depending on their ages. Yeah. But if it's about what options are available and whether they have control over them, here's my top tip. Like, I'm just going to give you one example about options, and I'd like you to maybe think about, well, what could it be for your child? Think about how you can get ahead of that a little bit, right? So if you're aware that your child is really sensitive to having power over choosing the options of like food or activity, or, you know, who gets like what role everyone's going to play, I would get ahead of it by asking them what 2 or 3 options are agreeable to them before you offer it to the rest of the family, for example. So let's say there are 8 restaurants for your 13-year-old, and you say, can you please narrow it down to 3? Because I still want dad, or, you know, mama or auntie or grandma or brother or sister, whoever, to also feel like they have some, I'm asking them too. So in other words, they're not the boss with the big B, but they kind of get to be boss with the little b by narrowing down the choices to 3 with your 13-year-old. can go so far. You can even say, hey, here are, like, for older kids, 13 and up, even 10 and up, you can say, here are 3 things we need. It needs to be within 5 miles, needs to have a vegetarian option for, your sister. It also needs to have a gluten-free option for grandma. Can you find 2 restaurants that you would eat at? And give it to them, give them that power. It's really neat. Like, I remember shifting to that position in my family. It took until I was in my 30s because I have a lot of strong authority figures. They all like to be the boss. It's like we're battling over that capital B, who's the boss. And I remember when it shifted where we were all like, we're going to eat, where we're going to eat. And I just went and said, what are some things we need? We need this far away, probably this much wait time, and we all want seafood. Okay, got it. Give me 5 minutes. And I asked for that. I came up with 3 options. I gave it to all of them. They did all their little research, and we were able to come to a consensus of which one it was. In the meantime, I had already made reservations at all 3 places. And then I went and canceled the other 2. So it was me kind of taking the reins. Whereas if I had taken the old approach of like getting into the power struggle with them, like, well, why don't we try this one? Or like, that one doesn't look very good. Oh, that one's too expensive. All the things that kind of lead to these conflicts and power struggles. I just got ahead of it, got organized around it, right? So we can do that with our older kids. And then with the younger ones, what we can do is build in more choices right in the moment of maybe not whether or not this has happened, like whether or not they need to eat, but like which of these choices. Although even with little ones where this is a thing that's happening all the time, I would get ahead of it too. Like, let's talk about food choices, for example. You can actually involve them in the grocery shopping and involve them in the food prep just enough so that they do get to have some say about what's on the menu. And the way you can frame it is like, I need you to pick at least one thing that you will eat, one protein, let's say. There's like one main thing, one protein and one vegetable that you will eat when we're at the grocery store. And then when it ends up on your dinner plate, that's it. It's time to eat it. And if you want, we can add some sauce to it or sprinkle some cheese on it or whatever, add some more flavor to it, but it's, that's dinner. And getting ahead of it that way so that you're not already having made the dinner, putting it in front of them, and that's when the conversation starts. So you back it up, start the conversation earlier, involve them earlier, get their input earlier within the parameters of what you can get behind. The one thing you want to avoid with a kid who likes power is asking them their opinion or asking them whether they'd like to or not when it's actually not a choice. That's like the easiest way to tick off your kid, like a power kid, especially who really likes that influence. Oh my gosh. And I remember having a phase like that where I would just get so mad. And I've done this with kids before, and they just get so mad because you say, it's time to go put on your pajamas, okay? And they're like, I don't want to. And you're like, oh, shoot, I phrased it as a question. Well, you need to anyway. And it's just like, why? I asked that to myself and of all of us, right? Like, why create a power struggle there, right? Like, why make it a question when it wasn't an option? Like, so be mindful of that too. It's a mistake to avoid with kids who get into power struggles and teens, okay? Only offer them power if it exists. Otherwise, they're going to be so mad when they thought they had some and you took it away, and influence and control. Okay. Maybe say, I've done that in the comments if you've caught yourself doing that, just so I feel a little almost like I'm laughing at myself, but I'd like some other folks maybe laugh at themselves along with me. And I'm sure those of you like Caroline, Melissa, Vanessa, who this was for, like, I'm sure you would appreciate it too. Like, I've totally done that too. Yeah. Okay. And then another one is, how do I balance my children's different needs with my own? This is Monica Scott Saunders. This is Sarah Mahue. I hope I pronounced her name correctly. Let me know if you'd like me to pronounce it another way. But so the reason we have these questions is because it is so easy, especially if you have the tendency to be a caregiver, like someone who, not just a caregiver, but someone who likes to take care of others. And maybe you're even more comfortable caring for others than receiving care. There's a lot of us out there. I will count myself in that. Like, I can be so generous when it comes to taking care of someone else, but then when it comes to me, I can be pretty lazy or neglectful. So one thing is Monica and Sarah, like, I just want to say, like, how human of you to end up finding yourself in that situation where you're not necessarily managing your needs with your kids' needs. And then also, I know Sarah, for you, it's more about having two siblings. You have a 4.5-year-old and a 10-month-old, and how do you manage their needs? And I would just venture to guess, and how do you make sure that your needs aren't lost in the midst of that? Um, so with this one, it's really important that you actually, I think, if you can relate, especially to defaulting to taking care of others instead of yourself, um, I would say making sure that you have someone who you're accountable to, whether it's like a study buddy, like a parent friend. Like, we create study buddies in my program for a reason, because we want to make sure that you have someone you're sharing your goals with, and you can bounce ideas off of each other, but also check in on each other. Like, hey, could you call me, and could you text me in 2 weeks and just see if I've actually made time for myself to exercise like I said I would, or that I'm remembering to drink my water in the morning, or whatever. Like, we can actually help each other out. So if you haven't yet found a community to buddy up with, like, even ask someone who's here, send them a little message, or tag them in a little message, a little comment saying, hey, would you work on this with me? Or join a community that's a little more intensive, like my Family Foundation's immersion, where we're going to be opening in early enrollment in about a month or so. So you can keep your eye out for that. So that's number one, because when it comes, we can very easily kind of skew our lives towards only taking care of our kids, and not and leave ourselves leave ourselves off the list of people to take care of. And we don't even realize how far it's gone until we have somebody else's eyes on the situation, and we actually talk about it openly, that we realize, like, I haven't showered in 3 days, or I haven't, like, whatever it might be, especially with a really young one. And when you're having that conversation, like, be asking each other, so what's going to change? What's going to be different tomorrow? What's going to be different this week? And support each other with that. So even right now, I can model that. So Monica and Sarah, like, what could be different in the next week in terms of your self-care, just to make sure that you are including yourself in that list of balancing needs. So now let's talk about siblings, because I know that was the core of the question. So I know that, let's see, it looks like Monica has a 2-year-old and a 2-month-old. Yeah, and I can see why you and Sarah have, like, kind of related questions, because she has a 10-month-old and a 4.5-year-old. So, kids that are in very different developmental stages is what I'm seeing here. And both of you having a baby, under a year. So one of the things that you're going to need to do is help the 2-year-old and the 4.5-year-old, the older child, start to internalize their routine more, because it does tend to be the burden of the older child to start becoming more independent sooner, which can actually be a gift in the end. But in the beginning, it can feel kind of like, I don't know, like a little bit like they can feel a little rejected. Like, well, how come you can be with baby for hours, but you're only with me for minutes at a time, perhaps, that sort of thing, like in arms, on lap, feeding, whatever it is, helping them fall asleep, rocking them. There's all these different ways that we're spending more time with the little one. So I would help them get more clear, like, how proud you are when they are, doing any part of the routine independently, and giving them a lot of positive reinforcement, letting them see that you can see how they're growing up so well, and how they're going to be such a good older sibling for their, role model for their little one. Like, oh, your, baby's going to learn so much. Your baby sibling's going to learn so much from you. How lucky are they to have a big, older sibling like you? So, really reinforcing that when they are doing things independently for themselves. The other is take time for training, like actually train them on some things that they can do independently. And I have different things. There's different things at different stages, which we don't have time to get into. But Monica and Sarah, if you wanted to apply for a session by taking the quiz, I'd be so happy to jam on that with you. So I really encourage you to do that. The link is in the comments. So you can just scroll up and click it, and it'll open up a separate window. Because what I would love to see is, like, okay, well, for your two-year-old, what are they already doing independently? What could we start doing? Taking some time out to train them on being even more independent. And again, with that positive reinforcement. And then lastly, I would want to see how to weave that into an actual routine, like something that will become the rhythm of the morning, will become the rhythm of the nighttime, will become the rhythm of the nap time, whatever time of day it is that, you're really feeling split. And like there's zero time for you, and you're just really going like this, like you don't know where to be first. I have a client right now who's in Chicago, who's a single mom. She's got two kids, and one who's walking already, so but under two and around two, and the other who's more like a kindergarten age. And we started almost a year ago, and so they're even younger. And we have been looking at the routines over and over again and getting them down and getting them into a rhythm, because she's by herself with the two kids. And that often happens. Like, we have to kind of split our attention. And so we've done a lot of smart things, like, create a visual chart that the kids can go to see what the routine is, creating a calm down corner that's like really exciting. So if one kid's upset, they have somewhere to go to soothe themselves while she keeps the other one entertained, or vice versa. We've done a lot of smart things to sort of set things up for success with two siblings who are of different developmental stages. So there's quite a bit you can do proactively, and you don't have to do it all at once. I mean, that's what she's learning. And some days are going to be harder than others, and you're going to forget everything that you were supposed to do. And then you get to start over again the next day. And she especially likes to come. She comes very regularly to our trainings because of the refresher it gives her and the reset it gives her, so she can step into building in those self-care practices again, or sticking with them, to revamping the routine and getting the kids even more on board with them, to teaching her little one how to soothe himself so he's not clinging to her all the time, so she can have some space when she needs it, for example. So all of that is possible. I just want you to know. And so, yeah, I think that's a good place to start, is to think about, see what things could you start to help your children be your older ones more independent with, and how could you start to get those routines into more of a rhythm. That's where I'd want you to focus next, and I'm so happy to support you further. Yeah, really nice. Good. Okay. Yes. There's more. We have a really robust set of questions here. So I'm so glad that we have this next question, just because it kind of takes us in it kind of takes us another step forward in what my advice just was. So Katie Short, you are on it, girl. Like you really realize, I can tell that it's going to be important to have routines, because her question is, how can I have more smoothly better established routines with my kids? So Katie, what I just shared with Monica and Sarah is also for you, about getting clear about what your child's ready for next in terms of being independent. So I know, Katie, let's see, I think you shared with me, you have a 2.5 and a 5.5-year-old. It's kind of similar to my client, actually. And so I can give one hot tip, but then, I also teach this in my program, so I can't give it all to you right now. Those of you who did the routines webinar last month could even chime in anything that I missed here. But what you're going to want to do is make sure that the kids have some way to track whether they're done with what they are trying to accomplish, let's say in the morning. And so you can have a little visual chart. I can share a little picture of that for you, so you can see what that looks like. For younger kids, I really like this one. And also, I know that some of my clients made one, so it's like kind of side by side. Here, I'll share in a second. Here we go. So you can see here that, like, this is the one that I pulled off of a blog. On the left, as an example of it, this is the one my client and their two kids made. And it's just so simple to draw a little picture of, like, get dressed, brush teeth, and then what the other ones were, like, eat breakfast. And I think this is go potty. Like, I think literally her son drew a little poop in the potty. And when they're done, they just flip it up. And so then there's this place that you all can go to see what's next and what's left. That's not you telling them, and keeping track of, did they brush their teeth yet? Did they do this yet? Did they what, right? And it takes some time. You take some time for training to practice it and get used to using it. But it really does become more like fun, like, checking off something off a checklist, like I did it. Also, if they're involved in making it, it's a great way to review what it is that the routine is even comprised of, like what are the steps. Yeah. So that's a really sweet place to start, is to just sort of go get really basic with your 2.5 and 5.5-year-old. With like, what are the steps we need to accomplish, and having some visual way to check on that. But Katie, there's so much more. And since I don't have you here in person, I'm not really sure like what might be getting in the way, because we talked about that quite a bit in the webinar. So yeah, feel free to also take the quiz and get some more clarity that way. And we can chat if you qualify for the session. So this next one is another hot topic, and it's one of the top things that I teach in my program as well. It's a whole pillar. This is, I think it is Belakina and Jenny and Maggie and Kristen all have this question. You are all wondering how you set limits, something about limits with your child. And so this is related to the power question earlier, the power struggles question, because oftentimes what happens either during or after, or like immediately after a power struggle, is out of bounds. So if you can relate to, you can rewind, go back to the top part where I was talking about power struggles. For those folks, for Caroline, Melissa, and Vanessa Moses. But you can come, I would check out the limits piece a little bit differently, which is not just getting clear about like where they have power and where they have choice, like that's a piece of it, but we all need to be able to stand behind why does a limit exist? And I mean in their language, in a way that they can understand. So of course we all like intuitive, we're like, oh, we don't hit because hitting is wrong. Like we don't hurt people. Right. But like we want to find a way to frame that in the positive of like everyone has a right to be safe in our household, which includes not getting hit, kicked, punched, bitten, pushed, or whatever it is that's happening. Right. So it's that first statement, though, everyone has a right to be safe in our house, in our home. And it's something that like, even when I say it, I feel a little bit more like my energy kind of shifts to this place of clarity and strength and confidence. When you shift yourself there, they feel it, especially because your tone and your actions will follow that confidence, that clarity. Everyone has a right to be safe in this home. And then you can intervene in a way that can be very clear. Things like, so you either need to put your hands in your pockets or put your hands in my hands, so I can see that your hands are going to be safe now. Like if they're starting to hit or go after their sibling, for example, or after you. Or walk away, give them a couple options. Because then you have ground to stand on, like why, yeah. And so there's actually an exercise that I do with my clients too, where we go through and we talk about like what are our values and why do we have those values, and then we look at behaviors and we relate them to the values, and we say, okay, what is like in the no zone? We call it the red zone. What behaviors are kind of okay for now, but we'd like them to, in certain circumstances, or we'd like them to grow out of over time? And what are the green ones, the ones that we actually really want? The green zone would be like the things you can say yes to. Like I can say yes to walking away when you're upset and taking some breaths. That I can say yes to. And that's what I'd like to guide my child towards, right? So even more important than knowing like what you don't want your child to do, it's knowing what you do want your child to do. I want you to help keep everybody in our home safe. When you're angry, it's important that you walk away and take some breaths, find a way to get calm. Yeah. Instead of like, just no hitting, no throwing things, right? Even though those are important, like that's important to paint a picture of what not to do, but it's even more important to paint a picture of what to do instead. Because otherwise it kind of makes it sound like getting angry is wrong. And we'll talk a lot about this in the meltdowns piece. And even in my Monday mindset next week, I'm going to be chatting about the number one mistake parents make when kids have big emotions. Because if you start to fight with a feeling, it's just, you lose. Feelings will go so much farther than you will. Feelings will throw the body on the ground and stomp and throw their fists and bury their face in the dirt and ugly cry. Feelings will not talk to you for a week, they are powerful. So let's not make them wrong. And by saying no, you can't do that alone is too close to making it wrong, because they can't tell the difference between the behavior's wrong and the feeling's wrong in the moment. But if you can say there's a way you can handle that behavior, or there's a way that there's a behavior that we can accept for this feeling, like there's a way to behave when you feel this way, and you guide them towards it, that can be so helpful. Oh, Kala, yeah. Okay, so for those of you who are maybe didn't catch it the first time around, no problem. We are having a webinar, yeah, a live training. We're doing two. The most important one is next Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And I would register and do your best to be there. But if for some reason, because you always get more out of it, but if for some reason you can't make it, you can absolutely come to, you can actually watch the replay the next week, okay? So Kala, I'm going to put the link in the chat for you, so you can just go ahead and register for that. Oh, holy moly, that's not the link. Let me get the right link. It was like a mile long. And the other thing that we're doing next Monday is we're just going to talk specifically about the number one thing to avoid. You know, kind of like a teaser for the webinar, really, to help you kind of get a sense of, oh, that's the wrong one. Oh, did I give you the wrong one? I might have. Interesting. Let me grab the right one. Oh, yeah, that was definitely the wrong one. Okay, now I've got the right one. There it is. Okay, here we go. The other one might be expired, so use this link. And I'll erase the other one so it doesn't confuse anyone. So, sorry, that threw me off a little bit. So next week we'll be here Monday at 2 p.m. just focusing on like the number one thing to avoid, and also kind of getting you set up for success with the webinar. Because if you go into the webinar with that, having come to the Monday, you'll be even more ready to take in the tips and strategies and go further with them after the webinar. Is that helpful, Kayla? Okay, great. All right, I have to refresh this real quick. Oh, awesome. So the comments are now gone. All right. So if you write any more comments, I won't be able to see them live, but I'll see them when the recording's over. All right. So last questions that we have for this Ask Me Anything. Now that we know we got the right link in there for the webinar. Melanie has, we have, let's see, two last ones. Let's do actually Jay, Rachel, and Carito's first. And Kala, since you are interested in the meltdowns piece, we're going to give you a little bit of this too. So let's see here. What their question is like, how do I navigate the big emotions? And I would say, come to the webinar and come next Monday to this talk on Mondays at 2 p.m. Pacific. But of course, I also want to just give you a quick tip as well. So the quick tip would be, you know, when you're navigating meltdowns or there are big emotions going on, you're going to want to look at like what could possibly be going on that is setting them up for having these emotions in the first place, right? Because oftentimes we'll focus so much on this moment and we'll not realize that there were all these like preconditions to why they're upset. That makes some sense. Yeah. So there's like preconditions for why they're upset. Like, for example, maybe they're hungry or they're angry or they're lonely or they're tired, right? And these are all good reasons to be upset, honestly, right? Because like basically the hormones are different in our bodies. Our kind of like our cognitive capacity has shifted. We won't be able to process, won't be able to process things as easily anymore. Like basically our bandwidth will be limited when we don't have some of our basic needs attended to. And so I would say a place to start, Jay, Rachel, and Ria, is getting really, really good at being able to say, okay, what could be going on here besides them being, you know, what they're saying they're upset about. And we've done this with babies, right? We like give babies a lot of leeway, like they're crying and we are always asking, like, we're so kind to them. We're like, oh, like what could be upsetting my baby, right? And then for some reason, once kids start talking, we have a harder time kind of giving them that leeway of like, there could actually be something that's contributing to this. And so I would just kind of encourage you to consider that there's something going on here, like something significant could be going on here. And it's not necessarily what they say it is. What I mean by that is a lot of times they will say things like, you're so mean. You're so mean, right? You're so being so mean. And it's like, actually, it's nothing to do with you being mean. It's the fact that they are, they skip their nap and they only ate half their snack at school, and you don't know that yet. So they wake you up. I mean, they wake you up. You pick them up and they're already like yelling at you. You can just be like, oh, okay, something must have happened at school today where you didn't eat or you didn't nap, or perhaps you're angry about something else that happened. And so just like always kind of giving the benefit of the doubt that there might be something else going on here, like a precondition to what eventually devolved into a tantrum or a meltdown or a big upset, a big outburst. And if you have an adolescent child, really be considering hormone fluctuations and growth spurts and growing pains. Like a lot of kids, when they're growing, their body are exhausted and hungry, and they don't even know, because they don't know that they need more food because they haven't adjusted their like idea of how much food to eat. So, doing a lot of check-ins or when kids seem to be going through growth spurts or having hormonal shifts is really important. And an acronym you can use that I really like is called HALT. And it's something I teach to my clients as well. And it's checking, are they H, hungry, A, angry, L, lonely, or T, tired? And I know it's kind of just like a cheesy thing, right? And it doesn't cover it all, but it actually works like HALT. In other words, like, let's stop for a second. Let's stop for a second, and see what's going on. And it could be other things, right? So here it is. This is by Breaking Down the Basics. I borrowed it from them, but it's been the acronym itself this part has been around a long time. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And like, I would add things like hot, overwhelmed, if you wanted to say halto, kind of gives it a little more gusto, right? Overwhelmed, hot, besides angry, there's also scared and sad. There can also be H for hyper, right? So there's a lot of ways it can go, but just kind of giving them the, like we do with babies, like give them the benefit of the doubt that, they may have something going on that is beyond this moment. I really highly recommend that. It's super important. Yeah, Jennifer likes this acronym. Hey, Jen, say hello to everybody. Let them know where you're tuning in from. She's one of my colleagues as well. A great friend of mine. Yes, overwhelmed, hot. Yeah, good notes. I love it. Thank you, Jennifer, for that. Yeah, let folks know where you're tuning in from and the age of your child, so they can get some context. That'd be great, and they can get to know you too. Yes, good. All right, so the last one is Melanie's. How do I get to my children to do their schoolwork during the lockdown? So, even though for some people this is actually like, well, now how do I get my kids to do their schoolwork now that it's not lockdown, because it's a completely different dynamic, right? But Melanie, I hear you, like whether you're in lockdown or you're just trying to get back to some kind of rhythm or establish a rhythm for the first time, with homework. Like I had so many of you went into lockdown in kindergarten year where there wasn't homework yet. And now the only experience they have really with academic school or with their school site is through virtual learning and a few days at school, that sort of thing. So I feel for you. What I can say is establishing routines is a big part of it. It's something we've been focusing on all this past month. A huge piece of it, because if you have the time set aside and it's just what's happening and you plan that carefully and you get your kid on board with when and like what snacks are going to be there and things like that, it can go a really long way. The other is minimizing distractions that are around you. So like you don't want to have like the TV within eye line or eyesight or any other screen. For example, you might want to even have, one of those little study carrels, like you can buy like a cheap, or just take a big piece of cardboard and partition it into thirds where it sits. It can kind of be in front of you, and you can decorate it a little bit with things that are like encouraging, like smiling faces and stuff like that. Like you can do it. I've seen that work really well at home and also in the classroom. And then the other thing is like to really start looking at the motivation hacks. And that's a whole nother piece that I teach on. But you can think questions like, well, what could make this more interesting? Or what steps could I break this down into? What does my kid need to understand before they can do this assignment successfully? Like maybe they need help reading the directions or doing the first one. Unfortunately, not all homework comes home set up for the kid to do successfully on their own right away. So just maybe also adjusting your own expectations of how involved you're going to be, particularly when it's a new type of assignment or a new class or a new subject. Yeah. Yeah. So those are some hot tips, Melanie. And if you want to go further in the conversation, like I've encouraged many of you to do, take the quiz to see if there's other things that are getting in the way, but then also it's a chance for you to apply for a strategy session with me where we can go deeper into your question and get you some personalized support. It's a strategy session because I really want you to have a breakthrough around at least one strategy, that new thing that you can try that can move the needle forward. But I also want you to have a breakthrough around the fact that strategies exist and that there's more where that came from. So we can look at a more global sense of like, what would it be like to spend 6 months to a year on parenting skills and strategies so that you maybe don't even need to come to these talks anymore. You're just like good to go. Or maybe it's just for review, right? Like you've got it. Like think of like, I don't know if any of you have played a sport, learned how to play an instrument, maybe even taken up like a martial art or maybe like a mind body kind of class like yoga, and had that moment like with yoga flow or with a particular skill in a sport like juggling a soccer ball, or maybe it's playing a scale, and you've had enough mentorship, you've had enough practice, you've had enough maybe community support, like team members perhaps, or other students studying the same thing side by side, that you had a breakthrough. And then it felt less like effort and learning and more like you're in a flow. And then you get to build from that and you never really fully lose it. Like you might need a refresher, but it's like, you've got it. Like in terms of brain, neurologically, you've like myelinated that connection in your brain. Like it's now like, it's streamlined. In other words, like your brain will, your thoughts will go there naturally. Oh yeah, this is when I soothe instead of offer choices when a kid's melting down. Or like, oh yeah, maybe they're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Let's check in with that first and see what we can do with that. So they're lonely, maybe they need a hug, for example, right? Or some reassurance that you're going to spend time with them in a way that they can receive. So those things start to become automatic. And that's, to me, is like the goal. Because when that happens, when you're in a flow state in your parenting, not only are you ready for the next stage of development and what it's going to throw at you, you've got this foundation that you can build upon, but then your kids get to be around a much calmer nervous system, and they get to have these tools and strategies too, while they're so absorbent. Like kids, like it's going to be twice as hard for us to learn these new things than it is for our kids to see us model it and just absorb it and be able to use it for their life and their parenting someday. So I'm very passionate about this, as you can tell. It's really important to me that parents get strategies they need and tools that are useful. And I only share things that I've seen work over hundreds of case studies with students I've worked with families I've mentored. And so you can always know that when you come here, I'm giving you the good stuff. And that there's even more nuance to get into, because you're going to say, yeah, but what about my kid who is ADHD? What about my kid who hates it when I explain things to him? What about my kid who, she's such a perfectionist, she won't even try new things right now? We can talk about it, and we can have a breakthrough for you. Like I'm confident now, after all the, now 2 decades of work I've done with families and kids, that I've got something for you. So don't delay. Go ahead and, sign up for a session and apply, see if you qualify. I know Jennifer's done one with me. Misha and I have definitely had great conversations. Jen, you've even come to some of our 3-day retreats and things. And spent a little time with the other members in the program. And it's amazing what you can do too as a community. Like parenting, there's a myth that you should do it alone. Like that's the should. And I would say you could, but you don't have to. So why would you? Yeah. So congratulations for being here today. Lots of love to you. We'll see you next week for the number one mistake that parents make when handling a big emotion and how to avoid it. And then we also have our great Navigating Meltdowns webinar that I highly recommend you just go ahead and reserve your spot in, so that you can get reminders and make some time on your schedule for that. Lots of love to you. Thanks for the hearts. Thanks for the likes. Love up each other's comments as well. And we'll see you next time. Bye for now.